I am currently standing on the shores of southern Vancouver Island. The Pacific Ocean is behind me. If you were to sail in a southwesterly direction from here for over 4,200 kilometers, you will arrive at the Big Island of Hawaii. Upon getting out of your sailboat, if you walk inland, you will eventually arrive at the foot of the dormant volcano Mauna Loa. If you climb the 11,135 feet to its summit, you will find a gray building. In the gray building, you will encounter two gray machines. Out of each of these machines, there is a hose. These hoses lead out of the building and up a tower. At the top of the tower, the mouths of hoses siphon in pure ocean breeze. Once every hour, these machines take a reading of this air. They issue a number. This number is crucial to humanity. This number represents the amount of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. This number is measured in parts per million. Currently, the number is 398.41 parts per million. In other words, in every million liters of air, there are 398.41 liters of carbon dioxide. What makes this number so important? Carbon dioxide lets sunlight into our atmosphere. It traps some of the heat. It lets the remainder escape into outer space. This trapped heat allows life to flourish. In short, carbon dioxide is the Earth's thermostat. It regulates the temperature of humanity's one and only home, the one and only planet Earth. The great American scientist Charles Keeling developed the two machines. He installed them at the top of Mauna Loa in the 1950s. Since then, these machines have measured the amount of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere every hour of every day, of every week, of every month, of every year, of every decade. What do these measurements tell us? The amount of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere is relentlessly increasing. At its first measurement in the 1950s, the machines recorded 310 carbon parts per million. In 2005, that number had risen to 380 carbon parts per million. By next year at this time, it is expected that we will pass 400 parts per million. By the turn of the century, if nothing is done, the number will rise to over 560 carbon parts per million. Does this relentless rise in atmospheric carbon dioxide pose a grave and pressing danger to humanity? The vast majority of scientists are in agreement that it does pose a most serious menace to humanity. Ice sheets and glaciers will melt. They have already started to. Our seas will rise. Coastal populations will have to take flight. Flash floods will invade our lands and claim lives. Worse storms will occur more often. They have already started to take place. More heat will strike our lands. Drought will wither crops. Humanity will have a harder time feeding itself. Some plant species will vanish. Some animal species will go extinct. Sea life will be diminished. Fishermen will have a more difficult time finding fish. If too much carbon accumulates in our atmosphere, all of these dire consequences will materialize. If the thermostat is cranked up too high, our living room becomes unlivable. What causes this carbon accumulation? Scientists are of one mind. We all are burning too much fossil fuel. Chinese, Americans, Europeans, Canadians, Japanese, Indians, everybody, in fact, the whole world. Too many cars, too many trucks, too many coal power plants, too many airplanes, too many combustion engines belching out too much carbon dioxide. Over the last 250 years, human beings have emitted about 500 billion tons of carbon into the atmosphere. At current rates, we will have emitted another 500 billion tons in the next 40 years. The hand of humanity has cranked up the thermostat full blast. Our living room is beginning to swelter. It will eventually become unlivable. Humanity can take only one of two paths. First, we can choose to do nothing. This is essentially what we have done so far. For 20 years, the nations of the world have attempted to arrive at a binding international agreement to limit emissions. Their failure to reach an agreement has been as persistent and as relentless as the rise in the Keeling curve. At the same time, the emissions of the two largest emitters of the world, China and the United States, have accelerated. The European Union seems to be abandoning its resolve to limit emissions, preferring instead the use of cheap fossil fuels to make their industries more competitive. And here at home, our federal government seems devoted to the extraction of as much fossil fuel as possible for sale and eventual consumption. In addition, we have provincial politicians, in particular Christy Clark, who are saying that the extraction and the sale of fossil fuels is the only way to rid ourselves of our provincial debt and pay for schools and better social services. Charles Keeling had a son, Ralph. Ralph followed in his father's footsteps. He became a climatologist. He now mans the Mauna Loa station. He believes that there was no chance for humanity to change. He said, "When I go see things with my children, I let them know they might not be around when they're older. Go enjoy these beautiful forests before they disappear. Go enjoy the glaciers in these parks because they won't be around." It's basically taking note of what we have and appreciating it and saying goodbye to it. On the other hand, humanity can change directions and select the second path. The second path is to do something. It is to halt the burning of fossil fuels. How do we do this? We need to price our carbon to properly reflect the cost and the harm it imposes on our environment. How do we price it? We apply a carbon tax. It is important that the carbon tax properly reflects the damage imposed on the environment. The current carbon tax in British Columbia is ineffective because it is so small. It hasn't changed our reliance to any significant extent. We need a higher carbon tax, one that will reflect its true and dire cost. Don't take my word for it. Listen to Andrew Weaver. He is one of the world's foremost climate scientists and a leading expert on global warming. He was a lead author in the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the group that with Al Gore won the 2007 Nobel Peace Prize. He is Canada Research Chair in Climate Modeling and Analysis at the University of Victoria, and has authored or co-authored nearly 200 peer-reviewed studies in climate, earth science, policy, and education journals. He was chief editor of the Journal of Climate from 2005 to 2009. He has been named a Guggenheim Fellow, a Fellow of the American Meteorological Society, a Fellow of the Royal Society of Canada, a member of the Order of British Columbia, and one of the top 20 scientists in Canada under the age of 40. He is also the Green Party candidate in the current British Columbia election for the constituency of Oak Bay, Gordon Head. I had the great pleasure and privilege of meeting Mr. Weaver at his university office. During the course of our interview, he emphasized the importance of a significant carbon tax to move us towards a sustainable future. What are the best ones?
Well, the first and most important solution, which any economist worth their salt will tell you, is that we will not solve this problem unless we put a price on emissions. And why I say that is, let me give you an example. Let's suppose, and I cover the example in that book I gave you. Let's suppose that I'm a farmer and I have cows, and I'm going to let my cows graze on a field. So there's a field out there, and that field is owned by the public. Okay, so the public owns the grass, and I own the cow. So I'm going to do a cost-benefit analysis. What is the cost of me putting a cow on the land? Well, it's going to cost some overgrazing, but everybody's going to pay that cost of that. And the benefit of the cow is exclusively reaped by me. So now every farmer will think the same thing, and they'll all want to add more cows on the land, because the costs of putting a cow on the land are distributed amongst everyone, and the benefits for that cow are reaped by the farmer. But there's only one solution, which is a collapse, because eventually there'll be too much overgrazing. And it's the same with climate. The atmosphere is shared. It is in every country, every province, every city, every municipality, every household, every person's best interest in every household, municipality, city, province, country in the world to do nothing. Because the costs of doing something are borne by the individual, and the costs of inaction are distributed globally. The only way to solve this problem is, in the words of the economists, is to internalize the externalities associated with our behavior. That is, to put a price on emissions. Carbon tax or cap and trade, either one is the same. That's number one. The single most important thing we can do as a society is to price emissions. What that does then is it allows other technologies to become competitive, and they start to emerge in the marketplace. Those technologies being wind power, geothermal, solar power, new building codes, green building codes, vehicular transportation run on electricity, perhaps biodiesel, hydrogen, etc.
And if the Greens were elected into government in the May election, what percent carbon tax would you impose on the public?
Great. So we presently pay $30 a ton. As Green Party members, we would like to see a continued increase at $5 per year until we get to $50 a ton. And to use that new revenue, not the old revenue, the new revenue, to assist municipalities across British Columbia deal with local issues like transportation, maybe in Victoria, Vancouver, maybe it's road maintenance in Prince George, who knows, but they would deal with the issues locally.